Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our industry series for which we meet every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We review one vendor or the solution. And for today, we have a very interesting solution. It's called Relex. So this is going to be part of that supply chain SNOP bucket. So we are going to have a lot of fun discussing that. Before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. I am going to start with my quick intro. Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, Andy, can I ask you to go next?
Absolutely. And as always, thank you so much for inviting me, Sam. My name is Andy Pratico. I've been involved in ERP software for manufacturers all my life. I've worked all over North America. I've worked with over 1,000 manufacturers. I'm in Vancouver, Canada, generally speaking. And I have a published book on how it helps companies evaluate ERP software before they buy.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Andy, Shrestha, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Hi, everybody. My name is Shrestha Dash, and I'm part of the marketing team at Elevate IQ. And I'm super excited to be here today.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, both of you. And if you're in the audience and joining for the first time, make sure you guys post your questions and comments.
By the way, Saretha, I can certainly hear the enthusiasm in your voice.
Thank you.
Andy's always joking, just get used to it, I guess. I mean, sometimes I just don't follow his jokes. They are too complicated.
That was sarcasm, Sam. That was sarcasm.
Okay, so now I know what that
So I
was.
got to smile whenever you see. That's all I was trying to do.
Right, I'm good at that. All right, so let's do this. If you're in the audience, just post your questions and comments and the stories. We typically try to utilize them, with our assessment. So they are always helpful. On that note, I will start with the quick briefing, guys. Andy, I know that we have done a lot of supply chain solutions. Shrestha, since you sort of started joining these panels, I don't know how many supply chain you have done. I think you have done a lot of HCM ones. So for this year, we have had a lot of different HCM solutions. And now we are sort of coming back to some of the supply chain solutions. So I'll give you a quick overview of how different supply chain solutions are structured. It's going to have a very different structuring of the suite, overall from the supply chain perspective as well. So overall, in terms of different categories that we generally cover, that is going to be number one, ERP is one of the suites. CRM is another suite. HCM is, one more suite that we have been discussing. Supply chain, some people are going to argue that that is probably part of your ERP suite, but generally the construction of supply chain suite is very different in general. Okay.
And depends on the ERP, of course.
Yeah, but overall, the scope of supply chain is going to be, Andy, and I don't know how much you remember from the Blue Yonder review, E2 Open, those were sort of the supply chain suites. Infor Nexus would fall under supply chain suite. Infor has their own ERP, and they might sell everything as the ERP, but the construction of supply chain suite is slightly different because that's a very different industry, very different market segment. The use cases are going to be very different as well. So it's a very different architecture in general. So the major components of any of the supply chain suites are going to be, number one is the supply chain planning, and these solutions are bucketed under three different branches, and that is probably coined by our friends at E2 Open. They like to segment this under three categories. Number one is going to be your planning, number two is going to be execution, and number three is going to be your network. Okay, and not a lot of solutions have all of these components. And when you look at the execution, this execution is more of the supply chain execution. This is not the ERP execution. The ERP execution is going to be very different. The scope is very different for the ERP suite. So here again, we are talking more from the supply chain lenses. So we are looking at number one, planning. Number two is going to be your execution, and number three is going to be network. Now in that we have several different components. So you are going to have, let's say, SNOP planning, and now that is sort of the supply chain planning, but supply chain planning could be slightly broader overall. So SNOP is just one component, and then you are going to have the WMS, TMS. Those are two, and then the network, meaning you are going to have the real vendor network, and that is also going to be segmented based on your internal supply chain versus the external supply chain. The scope of supply chain suite is going to be to cover both of them, internal as well as external. The scope of ERP suite is going to be just limited to your four walls. So those are some of the layers overall from the supply chain lenses. Now, where does Relex fit in? Okay, so Relex for the most part is your pure play SNOP planning solution. Okay, so they don't necessarily have a network, and they are not going to have the execution capabilities either. So the right comparable for Relex is probably going to be your, again, Blue Yonder, Manhattan. You are going to have your E2 open, but they are going to have a lot more capabilities. Relex is pure SNOP. The other layer that you might want to take a note and understand is going to be how different planning categories and the planning solutions are structured. So some solutions in the market, they are going to be sold as more of the supply chain planning solutions, but they might also have the other analytics component, embedded as part of their portfolio as well. So that the other analytics component are going to be your, FP&A. For example, let's say if you go to Anaplan, does the connected planning, the centralized planning. So they are covering all of those planning pillars. Relex is not going to cover all of them. Relex does not care for FP&A as such, but they are going to have just the supply chain SNOP planning, as well as they are going to have a little bit of workforce planning that we'll be touching, in our commentary as well. So a lot of different layers, a lot of different perspectives, but overall, Relex is going to be slightly more relevant in the retail space. That's their target market. The retail SNOP planning in general is very different. The kind of things that they need to do, and in retail, the kind of solutions that you're going to find. And I'm going to move to my briefing slide, and we are going to cover a lot of these points there as well. So overall, from the retail perspective, you are looking at the whole planogram planning, the store planning, the allocation at the store level. So all of these things that you need to cover as part of your retail umbrella. For manufacturing, the planning is going to be very different, and that's why Relex does not necessarily target manufacturing. They are pure play retail solution. And in retail, you are going to find Manhattan, Blue Yonder is probably covers both. They are designed for probably both of the business models. E2 Open is probably going to cover both as well. They are slightly more enterprise solution. This is pure play retail, and the closest comparison is probably going to be Manhattan, because Manhattan has a lot of retail capabilities, but they have other layers as part of their solution. That is going to be a WMS, which is very well known, plus a little bit of TMS as well.
So is this a complete supply chain management system, or is it really focused on SNOP?
Depending upon where that complete starts and ends. So you need to define what is that complete, I guess. So in this particular case, this is just one, sort of patch of that supply chain suite. I would say just the planning component, just the SNOP component. They don't have anything else.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Of course. So again, this is going to be, the industry is relevant here. So industry, you need to pay attention. They are going to be relevant more for retail, and in retail, they have several different planning buckets that they need to cater. So number one is going to be your demand forecasting. Number two is going to be your pricing optimization. Number three is going to be a little bit of workforce planning that is there. But again, we'll touch on that. There are some nuances there as well based on what we have reviewed in our ACM reviews, because they are doing very similar planning, and these guys are doing very similar planning as well. So we'll touch on that. We'll also touch on a lot of different layers of where should allocation reside, where should your the whole retail planning should reside. So we'll touch on all of those layers, but let's focus on what we have from the briefing perspective. So overall, from their background, they started in Europe. So they are going to have a lot more coverage, for the Europe market. But in general, their scope is not necessarily to provide the network data or um, the control tower capabilities, I guess. When you have those capabilities, then your where you are from or the region matters a lot more in general. In this particular case, Relex is slightly more technical platform. That's why they are able to easily penetrate in the North American market as the technical platform. They don't necessarily have their own data as well as network that you are going to find with solutions such as your E2 Open as well as Blue Yonder. But they started in Europe, so their adoption is going to be far more in Europe, but they have a lot of logos in the North American market as well. Overall, from the sizing perspective, they are predominantly, mid-market solution, but they do have a lot of enterprise logos as well. They have done some major heavy lifting that we have seen with Manhattan, I guess. Manhattan probably does the major heavy lifting in the enterprise retail. I don't know if anybody can match their volume. So Manhattan is probably maybe number one, number two overall from the enterprise workload perspective. Blue Yonder is probably going to be number one, number two there as well. They compete head to head, and these guys are going to be slightly more in mid-market, but they are able to do a lot more processing as well. One vendor that we have not mentioned so far is O9. They are slightly newer player, but they do a lot of business in this space as well. So overall, from the competing technology perspective, now depending upon how you look at the competition, I would say Infor is going to have Infor Nexus, which is slightly more visibility solution. They have SNOP planning, but they are going to be slightly more embedded with the ERP layer. Yes, Infor does have some presence in the retail space, but that is going to be slightly more retail manufacturing. They are not going to do as much business in the pure play retail, where you are going to require all of that planogram, planning, merchandising, etc. That's where Infor, it may not be the best fit.
Which products from Infor is strong with retail, Sam?
M3.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah. And M3, so they are selling Nexus with M3. But again, that's going to be slightly more retail manufacturing, to be completely honest. It's not pure play retail. When you get into the pure play retail, it's a very different space. You don't even have ERP in the pure play retail spaces. Then obviously you have NetSuite. NetSuite does a lot of business in the similar spaces as your Relex. They are in the restaurant hospitality space. Again, very different supply chain planning. Again, restaurants are not going to have a real ERP either. They are probably going to have some sort of accounting, financial reporting software. They probably don't require any ERP. Anything that is going to have a slightly more retail establishment, they are not necessarily good fit for the ERP workloads, depending upon how their business model is structured. Then obviously you have SAP, but SAP does not have pure play retail presence either. They have tried, but I don't think they have as much retail presence as other vendors. For example, you are going to find a lot more retail presence for Microsoft, as well as Oracle has their own retail component, so they are far more penetrated in the retail space than SAP. QAD is a very supply chain centric company, so they are going to be far more present in general in the retail space. In IQMS, which is your Dassault systems, they are also very similar to Infor. They are going to be slightly more retail manufacturing centric verticals. They are not going to be in pure play retail. QAD might do both, but again, QAD is also very manufacturing centric solution. Then you have the real competitors. So these are probably the real competitors that they have, from the supply chain perspective. So that is going to be Tools Group is probably the closest competitor. But overall, in terms of size, I would say Tools Group is probably going to be smaller than Relex. Relex is a much bigger solution. Slim Stock is another one. I don't think they have as many logos. They are not as well penetrated, but that's a very good comparable as well. And they are from Europe too. Anaplan is doing a lot more buckets of planning as opposed to just doing so. Anaplan is slightly more technical platform, so they are definitely going to be competitors. O9 is very enterprise centric player. They are going to be competitor, but again, in this space you are going to have a lot more layers in general. Like the micro vertical experience matters a lot more in the SNOP planning, because the kind of layers that they are going to require is going to be very different. So soft versus hard planning could be very different. And these are the terms that only supply chain people are going to use. Then you have Blue Yonder and Manhattan that we have already discussed. So from the industry perspective, there are some very interesting industries that I don't think I have personally seen with any other vendors, but they are able to do, for example, agriculture. Agriculture is a very different supply chain planning. Co-op supply chain planning could be very different as well. These guys are able to do that. Bakery, very complex business. Restaurants, is going to be very complex business as well. These guys are able to do omni-channel planning. So that's a very unique layer as well, from their perspective.
Yeah, I'm just looking up Slim Stocks. I hadn't heard of that one before, and they advertise AI powered supply chain planning, which it sounds impressive.
AI is far more meaningful, Andy, for supply chain planning suite in general, because this is where you are doing the real forecasting. Yep. In general, you are not going to have complete data, and that's why I would say 99.99% of the SNOP solutions are going to claim that they have very deep AI planning. Now, how good that AI is going to define, what you are going to get out of it. But this is where AI matters in my mind. Okay, so if you don't have any other comment, I'll keep moving here. So overall, their overarching position, the way they are defining is they help retailers, wholesale companies, and consumer packaged manufacturers align and optimize demand, merchandise, supply chain, and operations planning across the end-to-end value chain. So wholesale companies could be slightly trickier, I would say, because they would probably require a lot more costing. So they might have a little bit of ERP presence, compared to your retail businesses. If you are going to be very brick and mortar, centric business, even if you have, let's say, I don't know, even if you are doing hundreds of millions of dollars, you probably don't require an ERP, just because you don't have those cross-functional workflows and the cross-functional insights that you are going to require. So the architecture is going to be very different. Your SNOP is doing, a lot more heavy lifting. Your ACM is probably going to do a lot more heavy lifting as well. And in general, in those verticals, that's where you are going to have Manhattans of the world, Blue Yonders of the world, because WMS, your TMS, they play a much bigger role in general in the architecture. They are sort of retaining the state of the inventory as well. ERP is just very, siloed function from the financial reporting perspective. They are a sizable company overall. I think they have 2,000 employees, so they are not a new vendor. They are a very established vendor, to be completely honest. And it's a fairly decent sized company, and they have a lot of logos. So they are definitely, one of the solutions that you should be including as part of the mix if you are probably mid-market to enterprise retail centric business. Some of the other layers, fresh inventory is a very different supply chain planning in general. I don't know how many solutions can do that. I know Manhattan, can do that, but not the other ones. They are probably going to struggle with this. So these guys are definitely far deeper in their retail capabilities that you might not find with some of the other manufacturing solutions. And those are going to be, for example, let's say if you go to Connexus, which is also a very strong solution, but they might not be able to do very deep retail, especially if you go for nuances such as your fresh inventory, etc. Production planning, production scheduling is a very interesting, layer. All of the SNOP solutions are going to claim that, they might be able to do it a little bit, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to do in transaction planning. So there are two kinds of planning. One is going to be in transaction, and the other is going to be sort of the pre-transaction, more of the study. You are sort of generating the, numbers that you are going to need for your MRP engine, especially if you are sort of the production shop. So the SNOP component is really translating all of your supply chain layers to your safety stock that you are sort of sending to your ERP, and that is what is going to drive how many suggestions that you are going to need from the purchase order, production order perspective. But as such, the role of supply chain components is not necessarily to produce the order suggestions. If you are doing that, that means you are probably overstretching the capability. So that's where you have the layers of where you should be doing production planning, even though both of them might call them as production planning and scheduling. The same thing goes for purchase planning as well. So if you are doing slightly more location level analytics, how much should you be purchasing for each of the locations, and based on that you are cutting the purchase order. Obviously you'll be cutting the purchase order inside the ERP, with that has to go through your MRP engine. So the goal is not to recreate your MRP engine inside your supply chain suite. That is going to be slightly more what is that? This is going to be more of the forecast that you are trying to do inside your SNOP planning engine. And once you have done the forecast, you have sort of produced the number. Those numbers are going to be consumed by ERP, but ERP is going to be doing the real connected transactional planning as your business state is changing on a daily basis. So ERP is very current. This is going to be very future and probably historical as well. Supply chain collaboration, I don't know how much they can do, to be completely honest. They might be able to do some collaboration if you need to do planning collaboration, but supply chain collaboration could mean a lot of different things. Sometimes those that collaboration needs to happen transactionally as well. I don't think they have that capability as such. And again, they are bucketing this under supply chain planning, so obviously this is all part of the planning bucket. And then they have merchandising. Merchandising is a
Sam, the one below that says automatic replenishment and allocation.
Yeah.
How automatic is that?
So again,
are they giving recommendations, or is it actually executing?
The goal of this, and I'm glad that you are mentioning the term recommendation. So that's probably the right keyword, how people should be interpreting this. So this is really the recommendation. It is not supposed to be the actual execution, even though, and these guys don't even have the actual execution component. So now when you are doing the recommendation, that can be executed by your ERP, that can also executed by your WMS, depending upon who's doing what, right? So execution is a very different capability in general, but here you are right that the allocation that you are doing is you are doing more at the recommendation level. You are sort of making the recommendation for a specific customer, a specific location, that is not meant to be in transaction execution. So that's where the boundary is, and I'm glad that you are mentioning that term. But this is very confusing because everybody is going to use that term, and it becomes very confusing. Okay, where should you keep it?
It's a marketing, it's more of a marketing expression, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. Then you have merchandising. Merchandising is a very, very deep capability. Merchandising, planning. This is the bread and butter for retail. That's how they make money, to be completely honest. This is what dictates, whether you are going to be a successful retail business or not. Okay, so here you are looking at assortment planning. Now, whether you have the state of your assortment inside your ERP is not depending upon the business. And that's why I always say that, for retail, the real ERP is your WMS layer. You don't have a real ERP in the retail business because you are going to be doing a lot more heavy lifting. Your allocation is going to be here as well. And Andy, I'll make one comment there on your comment about the allocation recommendation. So in the retail business, there are possibilities that you don't have a real ERP, meaning ERP does not know anything about inventory whatsoever. Okay, sometimes ERP does not even know anything about the customers. Can you believe this? Okay, so ERP is simply going to capture your GL layer. It might capture maybe vendor layer, maybe POs. Even if it is keeping the inventory, it is going to be just the procurement processes. It's not going to be customer facing processes, right? So in those cases, since your WMS layer, the supply chain suite layer, is maintaining the state of the inventory and they are maintaining the allocation, again, in that case, you might have in-transaction allocation as part of your supply chain suite, but in general, the in-transaction transactions should reside inside your ERP. Yeah.
So on the left, it mentions retail floor planning. So is that like which products are going to be displayed in which location?
Exactly. Exactly. And that gets very complicated. And Yeah, very heavy leftover from the data workload perspective. So these solutions are designed for very specific purpose. They are more of the planning forecasting solutions. ERP cannot do what these guys are doing. There is a clear role in terms of what this system is designed for versus what an ERP is designed for, and you need to create an architecture that is going to support both, depending upon how your business model is. Retail floor planning, seasonal planning, planogram optimization. Again, this is how retailers make money. So you are going to have a lot more layers. Those data sets may not be available inside ERP, and it's probably a terrible idea if you are going to do this inside ERP. Number one, they don't have capabilities, and number two, they are not good at it. So technically, if you are a retail business, you would require something like this. ERP is not as meaningful for retail businesses. Price optimization, again, very, very, very different capability. And promotion planning, this is also going to be, they are going to require a lot more layers to be able to do that. Some of those layers may not be available inside ERP. IBP, they are able to do IBP, but again, IBP combines data from many different places, because for demand forecasting, you are going to require your CRM data, you are going to require your ACM data, you might require your POS data, you might require your ERP data. So IBP is supposed to be your centralized planning repository. The intent of that is not necessarily to create data warehouse, but it is the integrated business planning across combining all of different system categories that you might have in your architecture. Then they have SNOE and SNOP. They are calling this operations, but they are not necessarily doing the real operations. They are saying store execution, but in my mind, that is also recommendation. That is not necessarily the actual execution. Okay, they are able to do a little bit of workload forecasting and workforce optimization. And I don't know, Shrestha, as well as Andy, whether you remember this or not. During SCM, one comment that I had made is that, number one, the retail processes are going to be so unique, and these workers are going to be on the floor. They are going to be on their mobile. So in general, the workforce planning need to reside inside your ACM system. And that's why when we review your ACM systems, for example, let's say, which ones we have reviewed so far that were really present in retail? Ceridian, right? UKG. Which other systems that we have reviewed for retail? Info WFN is a real retail solution. They are majorly present in healthcare, but they do well in retail as well. So they were doing a lot of workforce planning, but for workforce planning, you are going to require product pricing data, etc., to be able to forecast the capacity. So probably the right place is going to be your supply chain solution. But again, depending upon how centralized do you want your planning to be, and depending upon how many different data sets you are getting. So again, the centralization matters everywhere in every single category of software. It matters in planning, it matters in your ERP, it matters in supply chain. So again, this is how you are going to sort of define the architecture. What matters for you more, whether you care for the centralized planning or do you care for the centralized transactional state. Okay. Then these are different industries that they cover, and this is going to be your offering that they have. They have many different buckets. So some of the industries that are really interesting, for example, convenience. I don't think we have seen that anywhere so far. They are probably the only ones that are present here. And when they look at,
does that mean convenience stores, or what does that mean? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And convenience store are a different beast as well. Okay, because they are going to have a gas station, and planning for that, if you're looking at pricing for that, that's a penny business. If these guys are able to do that, that's a big deal. Yeah, that's a very complex business, even though it might be a very smaller, footprint of retail.
Very, very high volume too.
Exactly. Yeah. Grocery is a very complex business as well. I don't know how many, and I don't know if they are able to do real grocery. Generally, when people say grocery, they simply mean CPG, which is much easier than doing the real grocery. It seems like these guys are able to do the real grocery. I know Manhattan can do grocery, but other systems generally struggle in grocery. It's very complex. Automotive parts tools becomes very interesting as well, depending upon if they are real supplier or are they service centric business, or they are manufacturing as well. E3 could be equally complex, so depending upon the scope of the system for very specific business unit, this architecture could be very complex as well. But seems like they are doing a lot of business in the automotive space as well. Building, construction, technical trade, again, very different layers. You are going to have a lot of union layers as well. So I don't know. I mean, this would be more used for the construction companies that are probably going to have retail outlets for contractors, in my mind. Yeah, that would be my take on this. I don't have any other comments on this one. In terms of the product offering, they are able to do a lot. This is very similar representation of what we reviewed in the other slide. So they have the supply, inventory, distribution. Then you have workforce, stores, production. So they are able to do planning for all of those. And then they are doing the space optimization as well. Again, looks like very similar to Manhattan. That's why Manhattan minus WMS is what it is, as well as the POS component that Manhattan has, that I don't know how many companies really use. But yeah, Relex is very, very, very interesting. So some of the case studies. So this is coming from a business called Imperial Tobacco. That's a large company. They have a staff of 500, I guess, and they have, but I think they must be more because they have roughly 46 manufacturing sites, and then they are doing partner collaborations across 160 locations worldwide. So here the comments that we have is retailers to offer category management advice across cluster, assortment, and space planning, ranging from national level recommendations and your word through to retailer specific for key multiple accounts. So again, whatever they are talking about here, that's exactly what you're going to see with Manhattan. And this is very space-centric planning, retail planning, and they are able to do this for a very massive business. These guys have 160 locations. In my mind, that's a 160 workload. And Andy, I don't know whether you remember this or not. During Manhattan, we were reviewing one of the news story. I think Manhattan was sued for, one implementation where they had claimed that they can handle any workload. And when you combine the store and the SKU combination, they were not able to handle that, million mark or million plus, something like that. There were a couple of millions, I guess, and they really struggled. Andy, if you're speaking, then you are on mute. Okay. So even Manhattan had struggled. I'm pretty sure Manhattan or JDA, one of those, I guess. I may be missing, which one. I think it was JDA, I believe, not Manhattan. But overall, the point I'm trying to make here is that even the enterprise grade solutions that are known to do the major heavy lifting from the retail perspective struggle with the retail planning. That's how complex retail gets. So do your research before you firm up yourself, even though Relex has a lot of logos, but do POCs because this gets very complicated. Then they are doing the behavioral, clustering functionality gave Imperial Tobacco the ability to efficiently create, I guess, store and category level clusters based upon consumer buying behavior, identifying like stores. So you are sort of doing the cluster analysis for different stores. Again, that is only possible inside SNOP systems, and providing fast, actionable insights tailored in line. And this is a very similar commentary that you are going to get with the other SNOP solutions as well. This analysis is far easier inside SNOP layers because you are not looking for that transactional connectivity. You are not necessarily impacting your operations if you need to augment data, change data, so that's why the what if analysis is going to be much easier. Augmenting data is going to be much easier in your SNOP systems compared to your ERP systems. Then they are talking about the ability to automate performance-based analysis for each retailer store state across all channels through rapidly evaluating all available product attributes. And again, those product attributes, especially for retail businesses, they get very complicated, and planning around that is very complicated as well. And that's where you get a lot of permutations and combinations, and sometimes they could be overwhelming for even the enterprise grade systems. And then you are looking at those consumer decision trees that you are designing. Again, very complicated process in general from the analytics perspective. They are talking about the cluster count. I guess they were able to reduce using Relex. So overall, it seems that it might be slightly more efficient in its planning processes. But I don't know. You might want to evaluate their pricing as well. Sometimes the pricing may have the cluster variable too. So depending upon the licensing pricing, you might want to think about that as well. So they are saying this resulted in much more manageable category to maintain. Most likely they were without system doing probably this inside a spreadsheet, and that's why they had to maintain a lot more categories, and that becomes a very complicated process in general. That means you are going to have a lot more analysts in your supply chain team to be able to forecast this. I don't have anything else here. I'll go to the next one. So one more case study. This is coming from S Group, and they have just one DC for groceries, and they have roughly 20,000 personnel, which is a sizable business. And then they have 1,000 stores, and they are covering for grocery business, and they have done this for grocery, which is wonderful. So grocery plus co-op, both of them are very complicated layers, and in this case they have that, so they are able to cover the layers of agriculture plus your grocery business. So very, very, very capable system in general. They are talking about 19 regional and 7 local cooperatives which are owned by their customers. It runs 1,000 grocery stores across the country, including convenience stores, supermarkets, and hypermarkets. And all of those are going to have very, very, very different supply chain planning in general, because the consumer is very different, the buying pattern is going to be very different. So they are able to handle all of that complexity. And if you look at the market share, so this is the Finnish market share, and they are from Finland, and the market share was roughly 46%. Can you believe this? That is half of the country. So obviously they are able to handle the enterprise grade workload. I would think that this is more of the mid-market system, but seems like they are doing a lot more. I don't have anything else that I want to hit on here. I think I'm pretty good. Okay. This is another business, and this is 64 plus online channel. And sometimes those online channel could be much bigger than your physical stores. Physical stores, I don't know what is the max revenue that any of these stores are going to do. Maybe $1 million, maybe 2, maybe 5. I don't know if any stores are going to do 10. Maybe Costco might be able to do 10, but that's probably going to be a limit. Maybe some of the fashion stores might be able to do a little bit more. I don't know, depending upon the foot traffic, but that's probably the extent of the supply chain planning that you are going to require at the store level. But sometimes we have seen scenarios, if you look at some of the online channels. So you might have 50 stores, they might each doing $1 million. But then you might have Amazon that might be doing your 50% of the business. So the planning is very different. So online channel planning is going to be very different. In this case, they are saying they have roughly 64 plus online channels. They have roughly 450 employees. So they are able to do both. So they are able to do omni-channel planning. Yeah. And some of the variables that you need to look at. So this is a bookstore, and bookstore also has very different preferences and planning. And I don't know, I've never seen a case study for a bookstore, to be completely honest, but seems like they are fairly deep in their supply chain planning as well. Because if you really think about it, here they are saying, they have the wide product range, then strong variations by region, location, and store size, the short product life cycle. Books have short product life cycle. That's very interesting. I didn't know that. The large number of new products and strong seasonal fluctuations and sale. I can see why there would be seasonal fluctuation, but short shelf life is new for me. they are saying that old solution did not perform as well as we wanted, as store would still be forced to process order manually, especially during peak seasons and campaigns. Moreover, shelf availability and inventory turnover were not good enough. um, they are talking about a crucial factor. They are saying it offered store and product specific demand forecasting on a day by day basis. Can you believe that? And though that is what adds a lot more layers in terms of planning and forecasting. And in Finland, bookstores just a few kilometers apart may offer a quite different product selection, because they are going to speak different languages, and they are going to have very different store size, customer preferences, etc. So that's what drives all of these variables in terms of how your supply chain planning needs to be. So they are talking about some of the results. Obviously, if you utilize a system and do your processes well, then you are going to get these results that they are talking about, but fairly powerful in my mind. I'll keep moving here. So we have reviewed agriculture, we have reviewed bookstore. So here we are looking at tire sales. Okay, so this is the business that we were talking about for the automotive business in general. So tire sales is a right fit for something like Relex. Automotive manufacturer, I'm not too sure. They might not be, even if they have the retail presence, even if they might have a little bit of tire sales business, maybe a spare parts business, etc. But still, those would not be the right fit for Relex. So in this case, this is the sales. Maintenance is a very different business, and I don't know what is the scope of Relex in this particular business, but seems like it's a very retail centric business where they are doing tire sales, they are doing a little bit of maintenance, they are doing spare parts planning. And in their case, the number of employees that they have is 4,500. Okay, and they have 170 own locations. So again, anything that is going to have locations is where the play for Relex is, and they are doing that location store-based planning. How you want to display your products in those locations. That's the kind of work that they are doing. They have 546 franchising locations in 20 countries, and depending upon the ownership structure of those franchises, sometimes you are going to work with partners, you have to share data, you have to do joint supply chain planning as well with those partners, and those are the scenarios where Relex is going to be a great fit. Here they are talking about that they are a global tire and car service chain with 800 outlets in 20 countries and almost 4,500 staff in directly owned and partner run operations. For the most part, the reason why countries are not as important for these guys is because they are providing just the tech solution. They are not necessarily getting into the compliance scenarios. For example, let's say ERP, HCM systems, you will need to evaluate whether they have capabilities for those countries or not. But in this case, their role is more of the tech solution provider. That's why the countries are not as relevant. You can utilize the solution wherever you want. I don't think you are going to have any issues, as long as you are using them for the right scope. So they are talking about their old replenishment model was based on making large advanced orders ahead of each session. Andy, you have a comment?
I was just going to say, does this all tie in transportation management as well then?
These guys don't have transportation management, so most likely they must be working with somebody. In general, if you analyze their logos, and they are going to have a lot more presence in the Microsoft ecosystem in general. Okay, gotcha. You will notice that they have they are installed very commonly with your FNO, GP, Business Central. So for the most part, the TMSs that you are going to find, probably there's going to be this solution called NMB solution. There are several different TMS solutions that are part of your Microsoft ecosystem. Yeah. Okay, if you don't have any other comments, I'll keep moving here. So here they are saying they were doing a little bit of centralized planning, but it was not as centralized because the stores had their own autonomy in terms of how they wanted to order. They were using ERP and Excel. Both are terrible, for forecasting and planning. That is not the right use case, for this kind of planning. And this is where your Relex is going to be a better fit. I don't have any other points. I'm still looking. Let's see. Uh, yeah, so this is all. If you look at this particular comment here, you are going to have real implications on your inventory. And again, that's where the money is, especially for retail and distribution, to be completely honest. And that is all going to be driven by this planning solution. So depending upon how good you are at planning is going to dictate, whether you are going to get sales or not. That's number one. And number two, whether you're going to be profitable or not. So it's a big deal for retailers. They are talking about seasonality. In general, Relex is very good at seasonality centric businesses, and 90% of the logos that you're going to see with Relex are probably going to be very seasonal business. And in general, seasonal planning, varies a lot. Not every solution out there can support that. In general, retail centric solutions are going to be slightly superior for seasonality centric planning, and Relex is your retail solution. That's why they have this. When they are saying when 30% of cold weather tire sales are made within 10 days of the first snowfall. Previously, we had thought that the quantitative forecasting of demand would be too difficult for our business operations. However, the forecast provided by the Relex system hit their mark so well that we have been able to reduce the level of advanced stock orders. Again, this feeds to your MRP engine, and that's where you are going to process your transactions. But they are doing the recommendation, and that is probably going to be word of the day, Andy. Um, um, I don't have anything else here. I'll go to the next one. One more very interesting business, but one thing you are going to notice here, they are also very store centric. So in this particular case, they have roughly what active SKUs is like what 30,000 per store, and then you have roughly what 110 stores. So if you multiply that, those many combinations you are going to get, which is probably hitting million. This is 300,000 and roughly what 3 million, more than 3 million. So here they are talking about allocation. Allocation of seasonal items was done centrally. And again, if you are doing this inside ERP, that's probably not going to work. So that's why the allocation state, especially from the recommendation perspective, must reside inside your SNOP system. The ERP is doing slightly more transactional allocation is the term I'm probably going to use, but allocation is probably going to be important in both places. In general, in retail businesses, you don't have a real ERP. The allocation is probably not going to reside inside your ERP. Again, depending upon if you care for cost, you care for financial insights across your processes. In those cases, you will require your allocation in that layer. Otherwise, your ERP layer is going to be very, very, very lean. Just financial reporting, GLs, maybe vendor-centric processes. That's it. So here they are talking about roughly about 1.7 million item store combinations. In my mind, I think that's a big deal. That's really huge. And they are able to do this for what? 110 store, roughly 500 million revenue. Again, still mid-market, I would say.
Well, sure, but the transaction volumes they're talking about are just mind-boggling.
Yeah. So it definitely has, much deeper capabilities than what I would think. They are able to pull off slightly more enterprise-centric workloads. So this is where Andy, for your comment related to your allocation, so they are doing pre-season allocation, they are doing in-season replenishment, they are doing end of season allocation, and they have used the term called virtual what is that, either fencing or ringing, something like that, for allocation. So this is more at the recommendation level. This is not your in transaction allocation. So you need to understand the difference. Again, don't try to create ERP here. That's not the intent. Okay, I think I'm pretty good. This is a decent sized business as well, roughly what 550 employees, 110 stores, 250 distributors, and one DC. SKUs. Wow, 200,000 SKUs. Can you believe this? directly to the stores, and 591,000 SKUs centralized distributors, via the DC. So again, if you multiply those, it's probably going to be millions and millions, of planning scenarios, I guess. Um, or the number of layers that you need to process through those scenarios. Uh, so here, one of the points that I want to touch on is that they are doing this with Dynamics AX. And again, you are going to find a lot more Microsoft in general in the retail space. They were very well penetrated. And you are going to find Relex there as well, was simultaneously looking for a supply chain management system to integrate with it. Management needed too much manual intervention and could not help meet its development goals. Forecasting and order proposals, time saving, optimized allocations, and the ability to run simulations and a higher level of automation, especially for seasons and campaigns. A system was needed that had a good visibility and an easier way of controlling the different channels and stock levels without contacting the supply chain vendor every time. So you are going to get all of those touches, because if you don't have your streamlined planning, you are going to be all over the place in terms of your ordering processes. You are going to be running around. So obviously that's where you need to streamline your planning. And they have used the term to put individual virtual ring fences around stock, as well as you can do around your customer as well. So that's how you are doing the allocation. But again, this is not your in-transaction allocation, just to be clear. Specified quantities of stock can now be reserved for each of its channels, online and physical, still remaining part of a single inventory held in one location. This allows imbalances between the two to be adjusted as soon as they emerge, and without the need for actually move away any of the stock. Now, if you look at the way that this planning is, this is going to have far more tighter correlation with your WMS and TMS systems, because you are moving stock between these stores and DCs and DC with stores. That is happening through your WMS, and that's why retail supply chain systems, they are going to have all of these layers combined as part of the same suite. That's why the construction of supply chain suite is very, 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 very different compared to your ERP suite. Even though the data may be used by ERP as well, but again, it's not as critical for ERP as it is going to be for your WMS, because WMS is doing a lot more heavy lifting in general in retail businesses. The project to implement both, and they were able to implement, the story that you have here is they were able to implement Relex much faster, and they try to integrate first with the old ERP. The rollout is going to be faster. The reason why rollout is faster is because literally the goal of this system is to produce one number. Okay, that's how much limited the scope is of the system. Obviously, you need to do a lot of heavy lifting to be able to come up with that number, but because that number is that Goldilocks number that is going to drive pretty much everything for you. But that is what you feed inside ERP, and then ERP is going to do all of your transactional heavy lifting. So again, the reason why you are able to do that is, number one, these systems can be fairly disconnected, fairly siloed. The scope is very different, and that's why they are able to roll these out fairly in a very isolated manner. So don't try to compare your SNOP system with ERP. That's not the intent. So I think I'll stop on this slide. I don't know how many comments you're going to have. Comments, more slides?
We can do a few comments.
Okay. Go ahead.
Or do you want to do a slide?
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the transaction volumes they're talking about are mind-boggling. They're just I'd be really interested. I mean, they're talking about AI infused forecasting. I'm really be interested to know how accurate the forecast it's calculating really is.
Yeah, so to be completely honest, I mean, my take on that is going to be AI is going to be as accurate as the data you are feeding it to.
Sure.
So one of a very interesting comment, Andy, that I have heard recently is AI is a wonderful magnifier.
A wonderful magnifier.
Exactly. Okay, so depending upon what you are magnifying, okay,
yeah,
that's what you are going to get. So let's say if your quality of data is super garbage, you are probably going
You're going to really magnify the super garbage. Yeah,
exactly.
It's yeah.
More comments, Andy?
Well, it's just extrapolating the same challenges that ERP systems have always had. The old expression of garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, but I mean, again, the state of ERP system, the role ERP systems play is very different. I mean, the implementation is going to be always complicated for ERP because you are doing a lot more transactional processing and you are going to have a lot more traffic rules in general for transactional processing. You don't require as many traffic rules inside your SNOP system. It's supposed to be a steady system forecasting. You can make mistakes. Nobody cares. You are not going to impact your operations. So it's almost like a sandbox, even though you are taking the data out and feeding it to other systems. So you are doing the planning, but fairly disconnected, fairly siloed.
And it sounds like the data collection is so automated in these systems as well that
So
it's almost end to end.
just to be clear, they are not collecting any data. So they might have some integrations built.
Okay.
Depending upon the quality of those integrations, sometimes these systems are fairly okay with your Excel, upload as well. So what you can do is you can download all of this data from your ERP. You can dump it. You can manipulate. So they are fairly, again, it's meant to be more of a sandbox. The way these systems work. So sometimes you don't even need integration because you are not going to corrupt anything.
There's more data mining than anything else.
Data analysis is the right term, probably.
Data analysis, pardon me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Data analysis as well as planning, forecasting. You are, combining your historical data. You are combining your future data, and based on that, you are trying to forecast your numbers. Yeah. More comments, Andy?
No, that's all I had.
Okay, Shrestha, your comments?
I don't have any comments, but I have a question.
Yeah.
How is the experience different if companies have different systems like a SNOP planning and WMS, TMS, or a complete, as you said, complete is subjective, but a supply chain suite?
So let's discuss that question a little bit. I mean, that's a very interesting question. So let's talk about whose experience are we talking about? Are we talking about the experience of the users that are going to be using? And are you looking at more of the user experience, how that is going to be when they are going to use these systems?
Yeah.
You're looking at user experience. Okay, so now depending upon the use case, okay, if you are going to use the right tool for the right job, then you are probably going to have really good experience. Okay, but if you are not going to use the right tool for the right job, you are probably going to have terrible experience. Okay, so again, these tools are designed for a very specific purpose. So for example, let's say you compare your your WMS, TMS, you mentioned ERP as well as SNOP. The intent of those tools is very different. You are trying to do a very specific job. In the case of ERP, you are trying to process your transactions. That's the real intent, of ERP. SNOP system is more of the study, planning, historical, future. You are trying to come up with a number that you can feed to your ERP, your WMS. Okay, WMS is trying to move things within the warehouse. Okay, that's the role of WMS. Now, if you try to create a WMS inside ERP, that's probably a terrible idea. So each tool is designed for a very, very, very specific purpose. As long as you are using them in their boundary, you are not overstretching them, you are probably going to have good experience. Otherwise, good luck.
Completely
Okay.
trend analysis, right?
Completely what?
Trend analysis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. More comments, guys? All right, guys. So that's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our industry series for which we meet every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with another vendor or the solution. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in today.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Sam.